All right, so you have your four quadrants. You have your four quadrants, and you have what do you have? You have banking, employment, food, and housing.
Yep.
And we did banking and employment. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's look at food real quick. All right. So the biggest plan with food is Roosevelt's going to pass something called the AAA, the Agricultural Adjustment Act. This gets passed again. This is all in his first 100 days. Excuse me. The Agricultural Adjustment Act and later the Farm Relief Bill is meant to bring stability to the agricultural sector. Right after the Dust Bowl, we've had massive numbers of like farms that shut down, and the market has been all sorts of up and down. It's been crazy. So what the Agricultural Adjustment Act does is it regulates how much stuff farms grow, and it guarantees that farms will always have a customer because the federal government's going to buy their stuff. Okay. Now, what this means is that a lot of times the federal government ends up buying food and then destroying it. So if you're a farmer and you create, 1,000,000 tons of corn, right? 1,000,000 tons of corn, but all of the other farms are also growing corn. It's a really good year for corn, and there's so much corn that if all of you guys sell the corn, the market is going to collapse, and then all your corn is going to go. Normally, you sell it for, a quarter an ear, but the price will drop so low that it'll be like a nickel an ear or something like that, right? Or it'll drop from like a nickel to a penny or something, right? And so if that happens, you're going to go bankrupt because you're going to lose all your money. You spent all your money growing it, right? With farming, you have to spend a lot of money up front because you have to pay for land and seed and fertilizer and insecticide and labor. You have to pay for all of that money up front, and then you get the money at the end of the season, right? So the problem is that if the end of the season doesn't give you the money that you need, you don't know that until it's too late, until you've already spent all the money, and then you go bankrupt. Okay, so the AAA is intended to keep farms from going bankrupt because farms have to front load all their costs. The result is that oftentimes the federal government has to buy stuff and destroy it in order to preserve the cost. If everybody the market can sustain like 10 million pounds of corn, 10 million tons of corn, right? But then all the farmers got together and they made 15 million tons of corn. The federal government will buy that extra 5 million. The 10 million gets sold on the market. The other 5 million just gets burned. They just burn it, right? So the federal government will buy it and burn it and just destroy it because they want to keep the price of corn stable. Here's a picture. This is where the government is killing cows. They're just walking the cows into the hole, and they're just killing the cows, right? There's one case where they killed like 20,000 pigs. That they buy all the pigs and just kill all the pigs, 20,000 pigs. And again, you're trying to keep the pork market stable, okay? The result here is it works. The United States has the most stable agricultural system in the world. It works. Our farms do not have to worry year from year whether they're going to go bankrupt. If a farm goes bankrupt, it's not like a shoe store going bankrupt, right? If a shoe store goes bankrupt, another new shoe store is relatively easy to open up, right? Like you could buy, if my shoe store goes bankrupt, you could buy all my shoes and then move to the other side of town and open up a shoe store and be fine, right? And you could do that theoretically. You could do that in, a month. You could do that, the turnaround could be very, very quick. But if your farm goes bankrupt, you're looking at a minimum of 6, 7, 8 months, a year, 2 years, right? that farm could have a lag of reopening by years and years and years, by the virtue of it just takes a while to grow food, right? If I have a pig farm, it takes me 7 or 8 years to grow a pig that I can slaughter, right? If I have like an apple orchard, it takes like 20 years to grow an apple tree, 20 or 30 years to grow an apple tree, right? Like it takes a long time to grow stuff. And this is meant to stabilize. The advantage is no more famines. The disadvantage is, what do you think the disadvantage is? Eric, take a shot. What do you think?
Well, a lot of food being wasted doesn't sound good, but I don't know if that's important.
Well, okay, so a lot of waste. There is a lot of waste, and a lot of people are really pissed off too, right?
Right.
Because if the government is slaughtering 20,000 pigs and people hear that in their newspaper, read that in the newspaper, or hear it on the radio, right? They're going to be like, what the hell? My family's starving and I wasn't even able to afford pork. I wasn't able to afford bacon. What the hell, man? Right? Like there's a lot of people who are really upset about this. Okay. So it angers people. It angers city people, poor city people. Okay. It causes a lot of waste. You haven't gotten to the biggest disadvantage yet.
The government has to buy it all, right?
Yep.
Do they have the money to do that?
It's super expensive. This is probably the biggest problem, right? Is that it's super,
Mm-hmm.
super expensive for these farm subsidies. The United States today, something like a third of our budget is farm subsidies. Today in 2021. Right? So it's a lot of money. If you think about a third of the US budget every year for the last 80 years, the last almost 100 years, right? Like it's a lot, it's expensive, right? FDR makes the choice that he would rather spend that money and avoid famine than save money and possibly have famine. What do you think of that choice? Is President Chen making that choice as well?
Hmm. I don't know.
I'll tell you, President Veenstra 100% makes that choice. We do
Okay.
not want a famine. You do not want a famine. You do not want people starving,
Hmm.
right? I am never going to choose the option that has starving in it.
Right.
I'm not going to choose that option, right? I would rather burn the money, but ensure that everyone has food. That's just the way it would be. And this is, at this moment, it's the best way to keep an agricultural system stable. And the United States has the most stable food supply on the planet, right? I think I think if we're evaluating this as a level of success, it has a lot of waste and it has a lot of expense, but I can't think of a better way to run it.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk some of these other ones. Here's some other things that are. Let's talk housing. All right. So housing reform. The biggest thing he does with housing is called the FHA. So put this in your housing box. FHA. So the FHA is the Federal Housing Act. The Federal Housing Act basically does what you think it does. It builds houses and sells them to people.
Okay.
Okay. So it builds houses and sells them to people. The FHA is somewhat successful. It does build lots and lots and lots and lots of houses, hundreds of thousands of houses, millions of houses. That's good. This is where we're going to get into one of these dark kind of under problems of this. The FHA is deeply racist and it's going to cause massive, massive race problems. The FHA um, basically creates housing segregation and keeps housing segregation as part of the American system forever. and it spreads housing segregation to every part of the country. The primary way it does this is something called redlining. Okay, redlining. Did you take AP Geography? Have you heard of redlining before?
Yeah, but I don't remember.
Okay, so if you took AP Geography, this is one of the concepts that you should have learned, right? And you do remember that you did learn it at one point?
Yeah.
Okay, so redlining is the practice where they literally draw red lines on a map, and then they only sell to Black people in the red lines. So African Americans are not allowed to buy anything outside of the red lines. Now, this is deeply racist, right? Because you're forcing all the Black people to live in just the poor section of the city. Okay, so deeply racist. It also forces housing segregation that is going to last forever. Today in the United States, today in 2021, our housing is as segregated as it was during Jim Crow. This problem is going to last for a long, long time. Okay. And the other problem is it spreads to every city in the country, not just the South. Okay. Here's Brooklyn, New York, famously not in the South, right? And here's Oakland, California, also famously not in the South, right? And here they are with their redlined maps. Okay. It keeps African Americans poor. It keeps them poor. It keeps their schools underfunded because schools are paid for with property taxes. And it also keeps African Americans from buying homes and accruing wealth. The primary source of wealth for white people in the country, let me rephrase that. The primary source of wealth for anyone in the country is housing, is real estate. Is like your grandparents bought a house, and then when they died, you inherited that house. You can either have that house or you can sell that house and make money off of it, right? The primary source of wealth is owning property. And this keeps African Americans from getting that wealth. It keeps them poor. It keeps them separated. FDR did not want this to happen. FDR tried to fight this. So let's make another, outside of our box here, we can make a note. FDR did try fighting racism. He did insist that the New Deal be race blind. He wanted it to be race blind. He wanted African Americans to get the same jobs that other people were getting, right? He wanted that to be the case, and it did help in some cases. African American employment rose from 0% to 15% for the federal employees. That's a big jump. That's a big, big jump, right? He did explicitly hire Black people into the federal jobs. The problem is that every single New Deal program produced a racist result. And the racist result is because the people who were running the New Deal programs were people in all of the local communities. And so when the local white person in Alabama is running the local program, then that white person only hires white people and only helps white people and only, this is the problem. FDR knew about this, and he was faced with the problem, do you shut down the program that is producing the racist result in Alabama, but it's also helping a lot of other people? Do you shut that down? Or do you let it keep going because it is also helping a lot of other people? It's not a great option, right? It's not a great option. And the election, the answer that gets him elected is you keep the program going, because all of those other white people you're helping will back you up. Now, FDR has something called the Black Cabinet. This is a group of African Americans who were put in charge of all of the New Deal programs. They were put as like advisors and stuff in the New Deal programs to make sure that the New Deal programs were being racially blind, race blind, or racially equitable. Okay, so you have like one of these black leaders attached to basically every New Deal program. You also have this woman right here, Mary McLeod Bethune. Mary McLeod Bethune is put in charge of the whole cabinet, and she's also in charge of the education for the entire country, including making sure that black schools are included in the benefits, including black colleges are included in the benefits. That when like colleges and universities start getting federal funding, she makes sure that the colleges and universities are also black colleges and universities. Okay, let's talk gender, because we've already introduced Mary McLeod Bethune here, right? FDR's cabinet is also the best for women so far. His wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, she is the first lady who like really turned the first lady position into like a job, where she actually like lobbied political support and tried to get things passed and like influence policy. Prior to Eleanor Roosevelt, every single first lady before her basically was just kind of quiet in the background and just didn't involve themselves with their husband's work. But Eleanor is deeply involved. She is a partner in many ways with Franklin, and in many ways, she's like the conscience of Franklin. She's the moral guidance of Franklin. That she's the one who is sitting there on his side, telling him to do the right thing. One of the right things, and she's one of the strongest advocates for racial equality. Okay, but she's also one of the strongest advocates for gender equality. Franklin Roosevelt is going to nominate the first woman to the cabinet. It's going to be Frances Perkins, and she becomes the Secretary of the Labor. Where have we seen Frances Perkins before?
Wasn't she like involved in the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire?
She was in the reforms afterwards, not in the fire
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
She's the one doing all the reforms afterwards, and that was such a success that she gets raised up to a Department of Labor for the whole country. You know, spreading out like workplace safety and labor union relations and stuff like that for the whole country. Okay. Okay, the last two things we want to do, this is part of FDR's kind of cultural stuff. He repeals prohibition, which was profoundly unpopular. Profoundly unpopular. People hated prohibition. He repeals prohibition. And in a moment of irony, Utah is the vote that brings alcohol back. In a moment of irony. Yeah. Maybe the most endurable program is one that doesn't fit exactly into the four quadrants, right? And that's Social Security. Social Security gives money to retired people. It gives money to retired people. And it was a huge problem with retired people who couldn't afford food and couldn't afford housing, and like they were getting kicked out of their homes and stuff like that. And this keeps them from, keeps them in their homes and keeps them eating food. Now, all of these New Deal programs are somewhat successful, right? I think I think they're all successful in some ways, but none of them really truly solve the Great Depression the way that FDR is trying to solve it. Okay. FDR also enacts something called Lend-Lease. As Europe starts going into war, FDR starts to use his power to hire Americans to start building weapons, to building things for war. FDR makes it clear. He says, I don't want us to go to war, but I think that we may not have a choice. The war may be coming to us. And by 1938, Europe, or by 1939, Europe is at war. Japan is already at war. Japan's already invaded China. Europe is already in war. And the United States is looking around saying, we may not be able to hold off much longer. So FDR starts construction of weapons and things. This helps the economy because it gets a lot of people jobs. And then he starts what's called the Lend-Lease program. This is where we lend weapons to our good buddy England, and then later the Soviet Union. We lend weapons to England. England uses the weapons to fight Germany, and then they're going to give it back to us at the end. What's the problem with that, Eric? You're giving me a weird look.
I mean, I feel like a lot of the weapons might be destroyed, and also what purpose would the weapons have after the war?
Yeah. Here's the deal. There's two reasons. Two reasons why we lend them this, right? First reason, England can't pay. England is getting bombed every single night. Their economy is in shambles, and Germany is really just beating the trash out of them. England can't pay. Reason number two, selling weapons to England is an act of war against Germany. And so Germany cries foul. Germany says, you can't give England weapons. And we said, no, we can't sell England weapons. We're not selling them weapons. We're lending them weapons. Right? And then England says, sorry, some of your weapons got destroyed. And America says, oh, well, that's what happens when you lend things to friends. Right? FDR is basically just giving the weapons because he wants England to win, right? And he wants Americans to work. This is the end of the Great Depression. World War II clearly ends the Great Depression. Right from this point forward, we can clearly say the Great Depression is over. And that's because lots and lots of American factories are now gearing up for war. Okay? All right, from here on out, we're going to get into the war. We're going to get into the war, but we're going to leave it here. Dorothea Lange, she's a good example of some of the cultural issues at the time. This is Lange right here. She's a photographer, and she takes the most famous pictures of the Great Depression, right? I'm sure you've seen this picture a million times, right? Yeah, migrant mother. Dorothea Lange is part of the NRA, the national, or the shoot, I'm drawing a blank. She's part of the national work programs, right? Where they're paying for, like, camera people, like photographers and stuff. So she travels the country taking pictures, and the federal government is paying her a paycheck to do that, to chronicle the Great Depression and chronicle what's going on. The exchange is that because the federal government's paying her, the federal government also owns the pictures. So all of her pictures are owned by the government, and the government just maintains them all free for any American to use. Which is why you see a lot of her pictures are so famous, because textbooks and stuff can use them without paying anyone. Right?
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think we're good. There's a study guide that's on Canvas, the Unit 6 Part 2 study guide. It's on Canvas. It's organized a little bit differently, but I think you can understand it. It's the 4 quadrants. The study guide is the 4 quadrants that you've been doing, so you should be able to fill it out pretty easily. And then some World War II stuff also. I'm planning on having the test be not Monday, but the week after Monday, right? The Monday after. So the test will be part of fourth quarter.
Oh, okay.
Okay, it'll be part of fourth quarter, and the study guide will be on fourth quarter as well. So we'll do that. Next week we'll do all of World War II. We'll get all the World War II stuff done, and then we'll be good to go. Cool. Cool. I'm done with new assignments for quarter 3. So quarter three is, you can still turn in late work or redo tests or something like that if you want to. But quarter three, I'm done with quarter three.
All right.
Cool. I think you have an A. I'm pretty sure you do, don't you?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you do. So your grade on quarter three right now is the lowest it will go.
Okay.
Cool.
Sounds good.
On that note, I will let you go unless you